The Hilari Empire stretched across the stars like a river of light, its worlds linked by ancient traditions and quiet discipline. For thousands of years, its rulers had been chosen from the bloodline of the royal house, and among them, none was more unusual than Queen Sereth. From birth, she had been blind. Yet her people never saw this as weakness, for she possessed a gift that no sighted Hilari could match. She sensed the world through vibrations, through the hum of every step, the rhythm of every breath, the tremor of emotions hidden beneath calm voices. To her, the galaxy was not a place of colors and images, but of movements and resonances, a web of life she felt around her every moment. Her reign was respected, but it was also lonely. Every advisor, every noble, every emissary bowed to her, but their vibrations were careful, measured, distant. No one dared to be fully real in her presence. She ruled with fairness and wisdom, yet in the quiet of her chambers, Sereth wondered what it would be like to know someone without masks, someone who spoke and moved without rehearsed perfection. When Earth entered the galactic stage, everything began to shift. Humans were newcomers among the stars, clumsy in diplomacy yet bold in spirit. Their culture lacked the rigid rituals of the Hilari. They laughed loudly, argued openly, and revealed emotions with little hesitation. To many in the Empire, they seemed crude, but to Sereth there was something fascinating about them. Their emotional vibrations were like music she had never heard before, messy, chaotic, but filled with honesty. Tensions soon grew between Earth and the Hilari. Trade disputes, misunderstandings, and cultural clashes threatened to fracture what could have been an alliance. Sereth listened to countless councils argue about tariffs and boundaries, yet she sensed a deeper problem. There was no trust. Words were spoken, but no sincerity followed. She realized that only something symbolic, something extraordinary could change the course of their relations. So she made a decision that shook the Empire. In front of her advisors, her council, and the human delegation, she announced that she would take a human as her husband. The room had fallen into stunned silence. For centuries, Hilari rulers had married only within noble circles, never outside their kind, and certainly never with a species so new to the galactic stage. But Sereth's tone was steady and her presence unyielding. The humans were just as surprised. Among them was Daniel Reeve, a cultural ambassador chosen for his patience and his ability to listen. He had no noble blood, no long history of power. He was simply a man from Earth who had studied alien traditions with quiet fascination. When Sereth's words reached him, he felt his heart leap, not with pride but with a mix of fear and wonder. Why him? Why this union? Later in private, Sereth explained her decision. "You are unshaped by our traditions," she told him. "You carry no practiced tones, no rehearsed stillness. When you speak, I feel truth even when it is uncertain. That is what I need beside me. That is what my empire must see." Daniel did not know what to say at first. To marry a queen was unimaginable. But to see how she carried herself, blind yet never uncertain, alone yet never broken, stirred something within him. He did not feel coerced. He felt chosen, and not as a symbol, but as a person. He agreed. The weeks that followed were filled with preparation. The Hilari court was abuzz with rumor. Nobles whispered in the marble corridors, some scandalized, others curious. For the humans, the news spread quickly across Earth. Some called Daniel reckless, others called him a pioneer. Yet both worlds watched with equal fascination as the wedding day approached. The ceremony was unlike anything Daniel had ever known. The Hilari did not exchange rings or vows in the human sense. Instead, they shared vibrations. In the grand hall of crystal arches, Sereth stood in robes woven with threads that shimmered faintly under the starlight. Daniel, dressed in simple human formal wear, placed his hand upon hers. A silence filled the chamber as their pulses aligned. To the Hilari, this was the deepest sign of unity. To feel each other's rhythm, not in sight or word, but in the quiet beat of life. Sereth felt Daniel's heartbeat, irregular, unpracticed, filled with warmth and energy. It was unlike the carefully trained heartbeats of her courtiers, who slowed their breathing to project calm. His rhythm was alive, shifting with every thought, and Daniel, standing before her, felt something equally strange. Though she could not see him, she seemed to know him more deeply than anyone ever had. Her hand upon his was steady, her presence surrounding him with a certainty he could not explain. The crowd, though filled with doubt and curiosity, could not deny the power of the moment. Two worlds had been bound not by treaties, not by armies, but by the simple act of connection. After the ceremony, Sarath and Daniel walked together through the palace gardens. The air was filled with scents from alien flowers, their petals glowing faintly in the twilight. Sarath moved with calm assurance, her steps guided by the vibrations of the earth, while Daniel walked at her side, still overwhelmed by the enormity of what had just happened. "You are quiet," Sarath said softly. "I don't know what to say," Daniel admitted. "I don't feel like I belong here, not really." She tilted her head, listening. "Belonging is not given by tradition," she said. "It is created by presence. Already I feel you more real than many who have stood beside me for years." Daniel smiled, a little awkwardly. "That's kind of you to say, but I'm not sure your people see me that way." "They will," Sarath replied with a calm certainty, "because I see you that way." Her words were simple, yet they carried a weight that Daniel could not ignore. For the first time since arriving in the Empire, he felt not like a visitor, but like someone with a place. As night fell, the palace lights glowed in soft patterns across the walls. The city below shimmered with countless towers, each one a reminder of the vast civilization that now looked to their union as a symbol. Daniel gazed out at the view, while Sarath, though she could not see it, sensed his awe in the quickening of his breath. In that moment, they were not simply queen and ambassador, ruler and outsider. They were two individuals bound by something both fragile and profound, the possibility of understanding. Neither knew what the future would hold, but both felt that something extraordinary had begun. And as the stars watched silently from above, their story unfolded, one that would change not only their lives, but the destiny of two civilizations forever. The first night after the wedding arrived with a hush across the palace. Beyond the crystal walls, the city glowed in quiet celebration, but inside the royal chambers there was only stillness. Daniel sat at the edge of the wide balcony, looking out over the towers and the faint shimmer of distant stars. He had been given new robes of soft fabric that clung lightly to his skin, though he still felt like an intruder inside the grandeur of the palace. The air smelled faintly of blossoms carried by the night breeze. Behind him, Queen Sarath moved with graceful steps. She did not need eyes to guide her. Her sense of the world, of every vibration in the floor and every breath in the air, gave her all she needed. She stopped near him, and though she could not see the view, she felt the shape of his silence. "You sit as if the stars trouble you," she said softly. Her voice carried both curiosity and calm. Daniel glanced back, a little startled, though he knew by now that nothing escaped her perception. "Not trouble," he said. "I just don't know what I'm supposed to feel. I never imagined this would be my life. A few months ago, I was just a man attending meetings and learning your customs. Now I'm here, your husband." The word still felt strange in his mouth. Sarath tilted her head slightly, listening to his words, but also to the rhythm beneath them. "You feel uncertain," she said, "but also curious. You are not overwhelmed by fear. That is unusual. Many who stand near me wear fear like armor." Daniel gave a short laugh, shaking his head. "I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous. But with you, it's different. You don't feel like someone who wants me to prove myself, you just accept me being here." "That is because I do," she answered simply. She reached out, finding the railing of the balcony with her hand, then resting her other hand near his. "Do you know why I asked for this union?" Daniel hesitated. He had wondered since the announcement, but he had never dared to press her. "You said once that I don't hide myself the way others do. That when I speak, you feel truth. But is that really enough reason to change everything?" Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close. "It is not only enough reason. It is the only reason that matters. My people have learned to hide themselves too well. They smooth their voices, steady their heartbeats, control their emotions until they are like still water. It makes them impossible to truly know. But you..." She turned her face toward him, though her eyes were pale and unseeing. "You are like a river in motion. I cannot see you, but I can feel you in a way I have never felt another." Daniel's chest tightened at her words. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. To be seen, not with eyes but with presence, was both humbling and strange. He searched for something to say, but Sarath continued before he could. "Tonight is not about duty or appearances. Tonight I wish to know you as Daniel, not as ambassador, not as symbol. Only you." Daniel nodded slowly. "And I want to know you. not just as queen, but as you are. They left the balcony and moved inside the chamber, which glowed with gentle light. The walls were alive with faint shifting colors, a design of the Hilari that changed with the rhythms of the room. Daniel sat on a cushioned bench and Sarath joined him, folding her robes around her. She turned slightly toward him. "Tell me what it means to see," she said. "I have been told of light, of color, of distance. But words alone have always felt empty. Describe it to me not as science, but as you know it." Daniel blinked, caught off guard. "You want me to explain sight?" "Yes," she said. "Not as knowledge, as feeling." He thought for a long moment. "When you see," he began slowly, "the world is like a painting that never stops changing. Colors they're like emotions but outside your body. Blue can feel calm, red can feel warm, green feels alive. Seeing is not only about knowing what is there, it's about how the world surprises you. The sky can suddenly turn golden. A stranger's face can tell you everything before they speak. Sometimes you see something so beautiful it feels like your chest can't hold it." Sarath listened in stillness, her hands resting lightly on her knees. The vibrations of his voice trembled through her, carrying not only meaning but his emotion behind each word. She closed her sightless eyes as if picturing something only she could feel. "Colors as emotions outside the body," she whispered. "That is different than what I imagined." Daniel smiled faintly. "It's hard to explain. For us, sight is normal, so we forget what it really means. But when I try to put it into words, it feels almost magical." Sarath leaned slightly toward him. "And do you find me less for not having it?" The question startled him. He looked at her pale, unfocused eyes, at the calm poise of her face. "Not at all," he said firmly. "Honestly, I think you see more than the rest of us. The way you read people, the way you understand what they're feeling without them saying anything, it's more powerful than sight. I think I'd rather have your gift than mine." For the first time that night, Sarath smiled fully, a gentle curve that softened her regal features. "That is kind of you. But I do not wish to trade. I only wish to understand." Their conversation stretched into the night. They spoke of small things: Daniel's childhood by the sea, the way the waves changed with the seasons, the smell of wet earth after rain. Sarath listened with quiet fascination, each description another layer of the world she could not see but could feel through his words. In turn, she told him of her childhood in the palace, of learning to walk guided only by vibration, of nights when she stood alone and felt the entire city breathing below her. Daniel realized something then. She had never been alone because she could sense everything. Yet she had always been alone because no one truly shared her perception. Tonight, she was opening herself to him in a way she had not with anyone else. Hours passed, yet neither felt the weight of time. The chamber's lights shifted from soft gold to pale silver, echoing the slow movement of the night sky. At last, Sarath grew quiet. She sat close beside him, her presence calm but deep. "Daniel," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you know what I feel now?" He looked at her, unsure. "What do you feel?" "I feel that for the first time the silence around me is not empty," she said. "For the first time it is shared. That is what has changed tonight." Daniel's breath caught. He did not answer right away, but he reached out, resting his hand gently over hers. She did not move, only allowed the connection, her fingers warm beneath his. In that quiet touch, no words were needed. A queen and a human, 2 worlds apart, had found something rare: understanding. And though the future was uncertain, both knew that this single night had already begun to reshape everything. Days passed after the wedding night, and the palace began to change in small but important ways. Where once there had been only silence and careful speech, there was now laughter that came from Daniel. The servants were surprised the first time they heard it echoing in the long halls. Hilari voices were usually soft and controlled, almost like music. Daniel's laughter, however, was unpolished, bright, and completely free. Some frowned at the sound, thinking it improper, but others felt a strange warmth they had never known before. Queen Sarath noticed it most of all. To her, laughter was not only sound but vibration. It rippled through the walls, quick and alive, carrying joy in a way no Hilari voice ever had. She found herself drawn to it, and sometimes she would ask Daniel to tell her stories of Earth, just so she could feel the shape of his laughter again. Daniel often worried he was saying too much, yet Sarath never seemed tired of listening. One evening as they walked together through the gardens, he described the noise of a busy human market, where voices rose and fell without order, where people argued, bargained, and joked with strangers. Sarath listened in fascination. "To us," she said, "markets are quiet places. Each exchange is orderly, each word chosen. But you speak of chaos with affection. Why is that?" Daniel smiled. "Because in that noise people are real. They don't hide who they are. You can see joy, frustration, excitement all at once. It feels alive." Sarath thought about this for a long moment. "Alive," she repeated softly. "That is what I feel when I listen to you. My people are careful not to disturb, but in their calm they have lost something. Perhaps they have lost the feeling of being alive." Their walks and conversations soon became known in the palace. Courtiers watched from a distance, whispering among themselves. Some thought Daniel was too simple for a queen, too unrefined. Yet others noticed how Sarath's presence seemed different now, lighter, more open, as if she carried not only duty, but also discovery. It was during a council meeting that the real change began. The chamber was filled with advisors and nobles, each speaking with careful words about trade routes and political agreements. Sarath listened patiently as she always did, but she sensed the same emptiness in their tones. They spoke for the sake of appearances, not from conviction. When the voices quieted, Sarath did something that none expected. She turned her face toward Daniel, who sat quietly near the edge of the chamber as an observer. "Daniel," she said, her voice calm but firm, "what do you hear in this matter?" The room fell silent. Dozens of eyes turned toward him. No human had ever been asked to speak in the royal council, and certainly not in such a direct way. Daniel felt his heart quicken, but Sarath's presence steadied him. She wanted his truth, not a performance. He cleared his throat. "If I may," he began, his voice uncertain at first. "You are all speaking about numbers, about who gains and who loses. But when I listen, I don't hear anyone talking about trust. You can set rules, but if you don't believe each other, no rule will matter. On Earth, I've seen neighbors fight over fences, but when they sit down and share a meal, suddenly the fence doesn't matter anymore. Maybe instead of arguing about exact shares, you should spend time together outside this room. If you can trust one another as people, the agreements will follow naturally." A murmur moved through the chamber. Some advisors looked offended at the simplicity of his words. Others looked thoughtful. Sarath, however, felt a resonance she had long been searching for. His words were not polished, but they were true. "This is why I asked him to sit among us," Sarath said to the council, "because he does not shape his voice to please you. He speaks as he feels, and what he says is what you do not dare to admit. That no law will serve if the hearts behind it are closed." Daniel's cheeks warmed, and he lowered his gaze, but Sarath felt the quiet ripple of sincerity in the room. For the first time in many years, the council felt alive, unsettled yet awake. After the meeting, Daniel worried he had embarrassed her. "I spoke too simply," he said as they walked together. "They must think I'm foolish." Sarath shook her head. "They will remember your words even if they pretend not to. Simplicity is not foolishness. It is clarity. My people have drowned themselves in ritual. You remind them what truth feels like." Daniel's doubt eased, though he still felt unsure of his place. Yet as the days continued, he began to notice that some advisors approached him quietly, asking questions about human customs, about why humans laughed so freely, or why they greeted strangers with such openness. He answered as best he could, never pretending to be wiser than he was, but sharing what he knew honestly. And in their questions he saw curiosity, not disdain. For Sarath, these changes were profound. Each day with Daniel revealed something she had never considered before. She found herself asking him to describe colors again and again, this time not just as feelings but as experiences. He told her of sunsets that painted the sky in orange and purple, of forests that stretched green as far as the eye could see, of oceans that glimmered like endless mirrors. She did not see them, but in his voice she began to imagine them. One night she placed her hands on his face, tracing the lines of his features. "This is how I see you," she said. "Through touch, through presence, through the rhythm of your breath." "But tell me, how do you see me?" Daniel hesitated, searching for words. "I see someone who stands tall, even when the world tries to make her feel small. I see someone who listens more deeply than anyone I've ever met. And when you smile even a little, it feels like light filling the room." Sarath listened, and though her face remained calm, inside she felt a tremor she had never known before. No courtier, no advisor had ever spoken to her this way. She realized then that what she felt with Daniel was not only curiosity, but transformation. He was not shaping himself for her, and in return she no longer felt the need to shape herself for others. As time passed, the empire began to notice subtle shifts. The queen, who had always ruled with strict dignity, now spoke with unexpected warmth. She invited not only nobles but also common citizens to share their voices in council. She asked for stories, not only statistics. She encouraged meetings where silence was broken by genuine laughter. And at the center of it all was Daniel, the human who never tried to act like more than he was, but who somehow changed everything simply by being himself. Serath often thought back to that first night when they had sat together and spoken of silence and presence. She realized now that the silence she had carried all her life was not emptiness, but a waiting space, waiting for someone who could fill it with truth. And that someone had come from a small world called Earth. What Serath could not yet know was how far these changes would reach. For now, she only knew that her life was no longer the same, and that the rhythm of Daniel's presence had become the heartbeat of a new beginning. The days turned into weeks, and the palace settled into a new rhythm. Daniel had begun to feel more at home, not only with Serath but with the people around him. Though the Halari were still careful and measured, there was a subtle change in their movements and voices. The laughter he brought, the honesty in his speech had begun to ripple outward, touching even the most reserved members of the court. For Serath, each day was a journey of discovery. She had always ruled by sensing vibrations, by understanding the emotional currents of her people. But Daniel had opened a new world. He had introduced her to concepts that could not be measured in vibrations or routines. The simplest things, a glance, a touch, a word, were now painted with new meaning. She wanted to see these things as he did, not with sight, but with imagination. One afternoon she invited him to her private study, a quiet room filled with delicate sculptures, crystal spheres, and murals that shifted in faint light across the walls. Though she could not see the colors or shapes, she ran her fingers over them, feeling their curves, their edges, the vibrations they carried. "I want to understand sight," she said, her voice steady but curious, not only as words but as something I can feel, imagine, and carry with me. Daniel approached, careful not to startle her. He reached for one of the sculptures, a small spiral of polished stone. "This is how I would describe it," he said. "Imagine holding the spiral in your hand but not touching it. Instead, you can feel its shape in your mind. You know the twists and turns, the points and smooth edges. Without actually running your fingers over it, that is what seeing is like. You feel the world in patterns and shapes in light, and every time you look, it changes slightly. The colors shift, shadows move, everything is alive, even if it does not move physically." Serath's fingers hovered over the sculpture. Though she could not see, she imagined the spiral twisting and turning, a rhythm in the air. She could sense his excitement as he described it, and the vibration of his voice carried meaning far beyond the words themselves. "It is beautiful," she said softly, "but it is not reality to me. It is a possibility, something I can imagine, something I can carry in my mind, but not something I can touch fully. Yet when you describe it, I feel it more vividly than anything I have known." Daniel smiled. "That is exactly what it feels like. You never have to touch or control it to feel its impact. You just feel it exist." Serath nodded slowly. "Then I shall try. I shall imagine the light, the colors, the shadows as if they were vibrations under my fingers, under my skin. And when I do, I shall know how humans see the world." For hours, Daniel guided her. He spoke of forests where green stretched endlessly, where sunlight poured through leaves, casting shadows that danced with every breeze. He described oceans and mountains, skies that changed from gold to orange to deep blue. With each word, Serath closed her eyes and reached with her mind. She imagined the waves, the hills, the sky, and felt them in her chest as though their energy vibrated through her. By the time night fell, she felt a strange exhilaration. Though she had not seen, she had perceived. She had imagined, understood, and held something beyond her previous experience. "I feel it," she whispered. "I do not see it, but I feel it. And in that it is real to me." Daniel reached out, placing his hand over hers. "That is all anyone can do. Sight is not just looking. It is feeling, imagining, understanding. You do it better than anyone I know." Serath felt a warmth that went deeper than recognition. In his words, in his presence, she realized she had not only learned to perceive human vision in a new way, but had begun to integrate it into her own senses. Her world, once composed only of vibrations, had expanded. In the following days, she began to make subtle changes in her routines. She asked her advisors to bring items not for inspection or ceremony, but for experience. They brought paintings, fabrics, musical instruments, and even small mechanical devices. She touched each one, guided by Daniel's explanations, and imagined their forms, their colors, their essence. In the process, she discovered something remarkable. Imagination could be just as powerful as reality. She could see through understanding, through resonance, through thought. Daniel watched with fascination. Each time she described what she imagined, it revealed new layers of her intelligence and curiosity. She had always been wise and perceptive, but now she was learning not only from what she felt in the world, but also from what she could create in her mind. One evening, they walked through the gardens again as the twin moons rose above the horizon. Serath's hands brushed lightly against the petals of alien flowers, each one trembling faintly under her touch. She paused near a small fountain, feeling the vibration of water as it splashed against stones. "Daniel," she said, her voice thoughtful, "do humans see vibrations like this?" He laughed softly. "No, we see with our eyes first. Only later do we notice the vibrations, the movements, the patterns. But I think what you feel is more precise than what most humans can see. You notice what we cannot even imagine," she considered this. "Perhaps that is why I am drawn to humans. You see in ways I cannot sense, yet you also feel in ways I am learning to understand." Daniel looked at her, surprised by the depth of her insight. "I never thought of it like that. I always believed sight was everything, but with you I realize it is only part of knowing." They continued in silence for a while, simply walking, simply feeling. The palace around them hummed softly with the life of the city below. Serath's fingers brushed against his, finding the familiar warmth that had become a comfort. As the night grew late, Serath stopped near the fountain. "I have a question," she said. "Will humans always feel as strongly as you describe? Or is it something you learn?" Daniel thought for a moment. "I think it is both. We feel instinctively, but we also learn to notice. Some humans go through life without seeing what they feel. Others notice it every day. I think noticing is what makes life rich." She nodded. "Then I wish to notice. I wish to learn how to perceive not only vibrations but the invisible patterns that humans call beauty, joy, and emotion." He placed a hand over hers again. "And you are learning, Serath?" "You already see more than you realize," she smiled, a faint curve of contentment. For the first time in her life, she felt not only powerful but also limitless. Her perception of the world had expanded beyond the boundaries of her birth, her training, and even her senses. Through Daniel, she had discovered something that no Hilari tradition could teach, that understanding and imagination together could create a new kind of sight. In the quiet hours of the night, they spoke less and listened more. Daniel described the simplest things: the way sunlight would reflect on water, the way colors changed when mixed, the way emotions could be sensed in a room filled with people. Serath closed her eyes and imagined everything, feeling the vibrations of her own mind as she shaped them. By the time the first hints of dawn appeared, she realized she had not only learned but had also created. She could see landscapes, people, and objects she had never touched, and the experience was vivid, real, and full of possibility. For Serath, it was a revelation. Vision was not only a gift of the eyes, but a gift of imagination, presence, and understanding. Daniel watched her quietly, marveling at her capacity. Though she could not see with her eyes, she was beginning to perceive the universe in ways he had never imagined possible. And in the shared stillness of that night, both of them understood that their connection was no longer merely about marriage or alliance. It was about discovery, growth, and the expansion of perception itself. In the weeks that followed, Serath's transformation became evident to the Empire. Advisors and citizens alike noticed a new depth in her presence, a new lightness in her interactions. She began to ask for advice, not to test her people, but to understand their perspective. She invited artists, musicians, and thinkers into the palace, not for decoration or protocol, but for learning and sharing. Through Daniel, she had learned the value of human perception, imagination, and honesty, and she was determined to integrate it into her reign. And though the Empire still had many challenges, Serath now faced them with a vision that combined the precision of Hilari senses with the wonder of human imagination. She realized that the true power of leadership lay not in command or authority, but in perception, the ability to see the world, its people, and its possibilities in ways that no one else could. The seasons changed slowly over the Hilari Palace, bringing gentle shifts in temperature and light. The twin moons rose and fell in quiet patterns above the city, reflecting softly on the crystal towers. The empire itself had begun to feel the effects of Sarath's transformation. Where once the halls were filled with controlled, measured voices, now there were moments of laughter, spontaneous discussion, and curiosity. The people had learned, slowly and cautiously, that the Queen's openness had not weakened her rule. Instead, it had strengthened it. Daniel walked beside Sarath one morning as they moved through the palace gardens. The alien flowers glowed faintly in the early light, and the water of the fountains reflected the moons above. Sarath's hands brushed gently against the petals, feeling the vibrations of life beneath her fingers. Though she could not see the colors, she imagined them vividly, each hue and shade guided by Daniel's descriptions, each tone filled with warmth and light. "You have changed much since the day we first met," Daniel said softly, careful not to startle her. Sarath smiled faintly, though he could not see it. "And so have you. You came into my world as a visitor, yet you have become part of it. I cannot imagine ruling without you now." Daniel felt a quiet pride, tempered by humility. "I am only myself. You are the one who has turned presence into perception, who has made imagination as real as reality. I have merely walked beside you." Their footsteps were quiet on the smooth stone paths. Around them, courtiers and attendants went about their duties, but their movements now carried a sense of ease. Even the most cautious advisors approached Sarath with openness, sharing thoughts they might never have voiced before. They had begun to trust not only the Queen but themselves, encouraged by the atmosphere of honesty and curiosity she nurtured. One afternoon, Sarath held a council meeting in a way no one had ever seen. Rather than sitting in a formal circle, she invited citizens, scholars, and artists to join. The chamber was alive with discussion, voices overlapping, ideas flowing in unpredictable patterns. At first, some nobles were skeptical, uncomfortable with the disorder, but Sarath listened, feeling the vibrations of each speaker, discerning the truth beneath the words. She guided the conversation with gentle questions, inviting reflection rather than demanding submission. Daniel watched quietly, noticing how her presence had shifted. She was no longer a ruler apart from her people. She was a bridge, a channel through which understanding flowed. Even those who had doubted her now found themselves thinking differently, inspired to see possibilities beyond protocol. After the meeting, Daniel approached her as she walked toward the gardens. "You make them feel alive," he said. "Even those who resist change cannot hide from it." Sarath considered his words. "It is not I who brings life," she said. "It is presence and connection. Your presence taught me to notice, to imagine, to understand. I only guide what you helped me see." Daniel reached for her hand and she allowed it, finding warmth and reassurance. "Then we have done it together," he said. "Yes," she agreed. "Together." The next days were filled with small but meaningful discoveries. Sarath asked Daniel to describe human art, music, and literature in ways she could perceive. He explained the rhythm of music, the layering of sounds, the interplay of voices and instruments. She traced the patterns of vibration in the air with her hands, closing her eyes to imagine each melody. She even began to compose her own arrangements, feeling the resonance of the notes in her mind before anyone else heard them. She asked him to explain landscapes and cityscapes in more detail, not merely as shapes or colors, but as experiences. Daniel spoke of forests with sunlight streaming through leaves, mountains stretching endlessly, streets alive with people moving in unpredictable patterns. Sarath imagined every scene, weaving together her sense of vibration with his descriptions. She began to see in a new dimension, an understanding of life that was both her own and his. Through these shared experiences, a new kind of leadership emerged. Sarath began traveling among the people of the empire more openly, not as a distant queen but as someone who listened, learned, and shared. She met with artisans, teachers, scientists, and children, feeling their energy and enthusiasm, sensing the pulse of their communities. The empire, once orderly but restrained, had begun to bloom with creativity, curiosity, and courage. One evening, Daniel led Sarath to a quiet hill outside the palace. The moons were full and cast silver light across the landscape. He took her hand and guided it over a small hilltop plant, letting her feel the texture of the leaves and the vibrations of the wind. "Do you feel it?" he asked. Sirath nodded, breathing slowly. I feel the life of this place. I feel the wind, the earth, and the growth of every plant. I can imagine the sunlight on the leaves, the colors, the shadows. And yet it is more than imagining, it is feeling, knowing, connecting. It is real, Daniel smiled. That is how humans experience the world. But you have made it your own. You see with your mind and your heart as much as with your senses. For a long moment they stood together in silence, the quiet stretching between them. Sirath felt something she had never experienced before. Not only understanding, but a sense of fulfillment. She had always ruled with wisdom, but now she led with insight, empathy, and imagination. She had learned to bridge worlds, not only between species, but between perception and reality. The weeks that followed were filled with more subtle revolutions. Sirath encouraged education programs where humans and Hilari shared knowledge freely. Scientists and artists collaborated, inspired by her vision. The Empire discovered new technologies, new ideas, and new ways of living that combined the best of both species. What began as curiosity and connection had grown into transformation. Daniel often watched the changes with quiet pride, though he never took credit. You have always had the power, he said one morning as they walked through the gardens. I only showed you how to notice it. Sirath smiled at him, her hands brushing against the petals of glowing flowers. You reminded me that perception is not limited by senses. It is shaped by openness, attention, and imagination. And for that I am grateful, the Empire itself responded. People began to speak more freely, to share thoughts they might have hidden before. Creativity blossomed. Communities discovered joy in collaboration. Where fear and protocol had once dominated, curiosity and understanding began to flourish. Sirath's leadership, combined with Daniel's influence, had created something unprecedented, a society that valued perception, imagination, and connection above control or rigid tradition. And through it all, the bond between Sirath and Daniel deepened. Their connection was no longer defined solely by marriage or duty. It was defined by understanding, trust, and shared discovery. Every day brought new experiences, new lessons, and new moments of wonder. They had begun as queen and human, alien and visitor, yet they had become companions in perception, partners in imagination, and architects of a shared vision for the future. One night, as they watched the moons rise over the city, Sirath reflected on the journey. Do you remember our first night? She asked quietly. Daniel nodded, smiling. I remember being overwhelmed and unsure of everything. And now? She asked. Now, he said. I see why it had to be that way. Because we discovered not only each other, but what it means to perceive, to imagine, and to connect. I have never felt more alive. Sirath reached for his hand. And I have never known a world so rich, so vivid, so alive. Not because I can see it with my eyes, but because I can feel it with my mind and heart. You have changed everything. Not only for me, but for the Empire and perhaps for the galaxy itself. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. Then we will keep discovering together. The Queen closed her eyes, sensing the vibrations of the night, the wind, the water, the pulse of life beneath her feet. She imagined the colors of the moons, the silver reflections across the towers, the faces of her people smiling freely. In that moment, she realized the truth that had been unfolding since the first night. Vision was not only seeing, but understanding. Not only perception, but imagination. Not only knowledge, but connection. And through that connection, she had reshaped her world. The city below hummed softly with life, a rhythm that Sirath felt deeply. The Empire was no longer just a collection of beings following rules. It was a living, breathing network of minds and hearts, shaped by curiosity, honesty, and openness. Humans and Hilari alike had begun to see not only one another but the possibilities within themselves. Sirath turned to Daniel, sensing the warmth of his presence, the quiet confidence and genuine honesty that had first drawn her to him. Together, they faced a future filled with potential, creativity, and understanding, and in that future, they knew that no challenge could overshadow the power of perception, imagination, and shared experience. As the twin moons cast their gentle light over the palace, Sirath whispered softly, "This is only the beginning." Daniel smiled, holding her hand. Yes, the beginning of everything. In the quiet of that night, two worlds had truly joined, not just through marriage, but through understanding, trust, and shared vision. And the Empire, guided by a queen who had learned to perceive beyond sight, had been forever changed.